The 90s. The 90s was arguably one of the most innovative times for guitar music, I said even more than the 80s, and it saw the start of some of the most influential acts in this kind of music, whether it's grunge, rock, alternative, or metal. Most bands that do guitar music nowadays, it's somewhat inspired by a style or a band that came out in this decade. So in this video, I'm gonna be going through each year of this decade and choosing a band, album, and song that represents each year. So let's start off from the beginning with 1990, and the album that I'm picking is Rust in Peace by Megadeth. Of course it's not Megadeth. We hate Megadeth in this house. The album that I'm picking from this year is Facelift by Alice in Chains. One of the most significant things to come out of this decade was, of course, the grunge movement, being a direct response to the glam rock and hair metal movement of the 80s, but it's been more about the music and less about the show. And I'm picking Alice in Chains specifically not only because, yes, it's the most metal out of the popular grunge bands from this era, but also because, I don't know, I think it's the one that really does this style the best for me. So here's the intro riff to the first track of the album, We Die Young. Let's move on to the next year, 1991, and for this year, let's put on some death metal to this list. Another very significant movement from this decade, and of course my favorite thing to come out of it, was of course death metal. Sure, death metal started in the mid to late 80s, but I think it was in the early 90s when it finally defined its identity as a style of its own. And for this year, I'm choosing one of the most important albums to come out of it, Suffocation with Effigy of the Forgotten. This album helped develop so many styles from technical and brutal death metal to slam and deathcore, and specifically styles like deathcore and slam wouldn't exist as we know them today if it wasn't for the riff I'm choosing from this album, of course the breakdown in Leash of Imveracity. Metal bands that started in this decade, especially thrash metal bands and the members from thrash metal bands.